Imagine if the sands of time flowed backward to the days of ancient Rome. A world of power, betrayal, and revolution that shaped our history. From Julius Caesar becoming the first dictator of Rome, to the Great Fire of Rome, and Rome being split into two empires. Today we are going to dive deep into the complex history of what is ancient Rome. 2,000 years ago, nestled along the winding curves of the Tiber River, lay a small tribal settlement of the Latins. This humble beginning, seemingly unremarkable, was the seed that would grow into a world-conquering empire, Rome. Its rise to power was not just a stroke of fate, but a masterful blend of geography, diplomacy, and strategic brilliance. To the north of this nascent settlement lay the Etruscans of modern-day Tuscany, an enigmatic civilization with a language still shrouded in mystery. To the south, the sparkling coasts were dotted with Greek colonies, vibrant with culture and knowledge. These neighbouring cultures weren't barriers, they were Rome's first stepping stones, as it sat at the crossroads of bustling trade routes. From its inception, Rome was no ordinary city. It was a sanctuary, a melting pot where outcasts, fugitives, and runaway slaves found not just refuge, but an unprecedented chance to reinvent themselves as full-fledged Roman citizens. This policy of open arms was revolutionary, transforming Rome into the largest metropolitan hub of the ancient world. The Romans themselves traced their origins to a tale as epic as their ambitions. They believed they were the descendants of survivors from the Trojan War, refugees from the Middle East. At the heart of their origin story were Romulus and Remus, great-grandchildren of the Trojan hero Aeneas. According to legend, these brothers were nursed by a she-wolf in the wilds of Italy, yet their vision for the future capital of the world was marred by conflict. In a tragic turn, Romulus killed Remus in a dispute over the city's location. In ancient times, Remus, the legendary founder, named the city after himself and became its inaugural ruler. According to lore, the city flourished under the reign of 7 kings, each leaving a lasting mark, be it through innovations like a calendar, a sewage system, or the Grand Capitolium, a temple dedicated to Jupiter, the chief god. The Romans, renowned for their aqueducts, bridges, and perhaps even the gladiatorial games, drew much of their inspiration from the Etruscans. This ingenious civilization crafted the Latin alphabet by modifying Greek letters to suit their language. Remarkably, the last Etruscan kings greatly influenced Rome, lending their military and governmental blueprints while Rome retained its stern patriarchal ethos. However, in 509 BC, a scandal rocked the city. The son of King Tarquin the Proud violated the virtuous Lucretia. Outraged, the Romans exiled Tarquin, marking the end of the monarchical era in Rome. Determined to prevent such power abuse, from 509 BC onwards, the Romans adopted a new system. Instead of a king, 2 consuls were elected annually to maintain peace. Their actions were overseen by the Senate, comprising 300 patres, fathers, hence the term patricians. Those not born into these elite families formed the plebeian class. Despite their wealth, the plebeians in ancient Rome were denied the right to hold state positions, a privilege reserved for the patricians. This inequality sparked a 2-century struggle for rights, during which the Roman Republic, literally the public thing, was forged. The plebeians, forming the backbone of the Roman army, wielded their military importance as leverage. Threatening to migrate en masse to a neighbouring hill, they pressured the patricians into concessions, like the creation of the tribune of the plebeians, a representative with the power to veto decisions made by the consuls. One significant triumph for the plebeians was the publication of the first written laws. By 287 BC, they had achieved complete legal equality with the patricians. This unity of Roman society was epitomized in the phrase Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the Roman people, an emblem still found on Rome's manhole covers today. In 390 BC, Rome faced a dire threat when the Gauls unexpectedly seized the city. The traditional guard dogs, failing to alert the Romans, were henceforth crucified annually in a ritual of atonement. In contrast, the geese, whose honking roused the defenders of the Capitoline Hill. The near destruction of Rome by the Gauls served as a wake-up call, leading to a significant military overhaul. The Roman legion was reorganised into smaller, more agile units known as maniples, enhancing battlefield mobility. This reform set the stage for a century of relentless warfare. However, Rome's approach to conquest was unique. Instead of merely imposing tributes on defeated foes, they forged alliances, integrating them into a vast network of loyal supporters. This strategy provided Rome with a seemingly endless supply of recruits. During this period, Rome's legions proved their mettle against some of the era's most formidable forces, including the Macedonian phalanx. This fighting unit, renowned for its efficiency, was then led by Pyrrhus, a relative of the legendary Alexander the Great. Pyrrhus was summoned by the Greek city of Tarentum, the last bastion of resistance in Italy, to halt the advancing Roman power. After overcoming Tarentum and extending its influence to Sicily, Rome faced a new and formidable opponent, Carthage, the dominant power in the Mediterranean. The Romans referred to the Carthaginians as Punic, derived from their Phoenician heritage, thus giving name to the ensuing Punic Wars. Over the next century, Rome engaged in a series of conflicts with Carthage, known as the Punic Wars. By 149 BC, Rome had captured much of Carthage's territories and those of its allies. Despite repeated defeats, Carthage's robust trade network enabled it to recover swiftly each time. This resilience prompted Senator Cato the Elder to famously conclude every speech with the emphatic statement, "Carthago delenda est," Carthage must be destroyed. His words were eventually realized. Carthage was razed, its inhabitants enslaved, and according to legend, its lands cursed with salt to prevent reoccupation. In the same pivotal year of 146 BC, Rome also annihilated Corinth, thus absorbing Greece and Macedonia into its empire as provinces. This conquest brought the immense wealth of Alexander the Great's crumbling empire into Roman hands. However, this expansion marked more than territorial gain. It signified a cultural transformation. Rome, with its roots in patriarchal simplicity, gradually embraced the sophisticated culture of Greece. Greek essentially became a secondary official language, influencing Roman education, philosophy, and oratory. The Romans eagerly studied Greek subjects like hexameters, history, and rhetoric. Cicero, Rome's most celebrated orator, even modelled his speeches after the Greek Demosthenes. Despite their vast empire, the Romans reserved full citizenship rights exclusively for themselves. The majority of Italy's military personnel, despite their contributions, lacked citizenship rights in ancient Rome. This inequity led to a significant revolt as these soldiers demanded equality. Their victory in this conflict granted them the right to participate in state governance, marking a pivotal shift in Roman history. Unlike ancient Greece, which remained a patchwork of competing city-states, Rome adopted a more inclusive approach by gradually extending citizenship rights to conquered peoples. This strategy laid the foundation for a truly expansive empire. However, Rome's success also brought challenges akin to modern globalization. The influx of cheap grain and slave labor, largely unpaid, led to the financial ruin of many small-scale farmers. Displaced from their lands, these farmers flocked to the cities, swelling the ranks of the proletariat, those with nothing to lose but their progeny. Meanwhile, the wealthy elite capitalized on this crisis, purchasing land from the destitute farmers at minimal prices. This economic disparity created a profound rift between the Senate and the Roman people, splitting society into two antagonistic factions. During this period, the Gracchus brothers, as tribunes of the people, attempted to bridge this divide. They proposed redistributing excess public lands to the impoverished peasantry and initiating free bread distributions for the poor. However, their efforts met with fierce resistance from the disgruntled senators, who resorted to violence to quell the Gracchi movement. The assassination of the Gracchus brothers and several thousand of their supporters plunged Rome into a series of civil wars. Gaius Marius, a popular general, offered a novel solution to the growing plight of the proletariat. He began enlisting these disenfranchised masses into the army, promising them land upon completion of service. This policy forged a new bond of loyalty, with legions becoming personally devoted to their generals. In 49 BC, a pivotal conflict erupted between two of Rome's most distinguished generals. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, known as Pompey the Great, had expanded Rome's eastern territories, including restive Judea. He had eradicated Mediterranean piracy, quashed Spartacus's slave uprising, and earned his moniker the Great through these feats. Meanwhile, Gaius Julius Caesar had completed the conquest of Gaul, actions viewed today as genocidal. He decimated 1 million Gauls and enslaved many more, later extending his campaigns to Germanic tribes and even invading Britain. Roman law mandated that a general must disband his legions before returning to Rome, where he would be celebrated with a triumphal entry. However, Caesar defied this tradition in a bold move. Refusing to disband his army at the Rubicon, the border of Italy, he led his legions directly into Rome. This act ignited several years of civil war as Caesar sought to defeat Pompey the Great and other rivals. The conflict was unprecedented, pitting Roman legions against each other. In his conquests, Caesar not only annexed new territories, but also played a pivotal role in Egyptian politics by restoring Cleopatra to the throne after a romantic sojourn along the Nile. Their liaison resulted in the birth of Caesarion, also known as Little Caesar. Upon his return to Rome, Caesar assumed the title Imperator, originally denoting a victorious commander, and consolidated his power by holding multiple offices: consul, tribune of the people, and dictator. Whispers spread that Caesar harbored ambitions of kingship, igniting a conspiracy within the Senate. This culminated in his assassination, a seismic event in Roman history. In an unforeseen twist, Caesar's grandnephew, the 19-year-old Gaius Octavian, inherited his vast wealth. Octavian quickly immersed himself in the ensuing power struggle. By 31 BC, he had defeated his principal rival, Mark Antony, who was romantically involved with Cleopatra. Following their defeat, Antony and Cleopatra tragically ended their lives. Octavian emerged as the sole ruler of an immense territory. While Julius Caesar's reign was brief, lasting only 4 years, Octavian, who took the title Augustus, meaning the Venerable or the Great, ruled for an impressive 43 years. Augustus deftly navigated the political landscape, retaining the facade of the Republic, while consolidating his authority across all significant offices, effectively rendering his power near absolute. Yet, he adopted the unassuming title of princeps, meaning the first among equals in the Senate, rather than overtly declaring himself an emperor. During his reign, though skirmishes with bordering barbarian tribes persisted, the internal realm of the empire experienced the Pax Romana, a prolonged period of peace and stability that would last for 200 years. This era was marked by economic prosperity and significant urban development. Augustus initiated the distribution of free bread to 200,000 citizens, reflecting his commitment to public welfare. In the heart of Rome, a massive basin measuring 500 meters was constructed for staging naval battles with real ships, where 3,000 gladiators participated in these grand spectacles. The capital city was also a hub of architectural innovation, with concrete multi-story buildings proliferating rapidly. Augustus even had to implement height regulations to limit these burgeoning skyscrapers to a maximum of 6 stories. Despite these advancements, the citizens of Rome grappled with urban issues familiar even today: traffic congestion, pollution in the Tiber River, and escalating rent prices. Amidst this backdrop, a golden age of poetry and culture flourished under Maecenas. Special grants were allocated by Augustus to laud the state's virtues, leading to the construction of temples in his honour and the naming of a month after him. This began the cult of the Roman emperors, where they were revered alongside deities like Mars and Jupiter. After Augustus, the power of the emperor became hereditary. Historical records, often penned by senatorial opposition, paint vivid portraits of the subsequent emperors. Tiberius, noted for his suspicion, wielded the law on treason to unleash terror. Under this law, trivial actions, such as failing to praise the emperor adequately or using coins bearing his image in disreputable places, could be construed as offences. In Judea, a preacher who refused to worship the emperor as a deity was crucified, highlighting the extent of imperial influence. Caligula, known for his eccentricity, reportedly considered appointing his horse as consul. The scholarly and indulgent Claudius, preoccupied with feasts and alphabetic reforms, was less attentive to court intrigues. His marital life was tumultuous. One wife was infamous for her escapades in a brothel, rivaling professional courtesans, while another, Agrippina, allegedly poisoned him with mushrooms to place her son from a previous marriage, Nero. Nero, who fancied himself more an actor than an emperor, is infamously remembered for his tyrannical reign. He is accused of matricide, killing his own mother, and allegedly responsible for the martyrdom of the apostles Peter and Paul. He is also notoriously associated with the Great Fire of Rome, during which he is said to have recited verses about the fall of Troy. In the aftermath, he purportedly blamed the Christians, initiating one of the first major persecutions against them. His reign ended with his own suicide. Our knowledge of this period largely comes from the works of Tacitus, a historian and senator who chronicled the decline of republican institutions. During this era, the true power in the empire shifted from the Senate to the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal security force established by Augustus. They played a crucial role in the empire's politics, having suffocated Tiberius, assassinated Caligula, and declared Claudius as emperor. Despite these tumultuous internal dynamics, the Roman Empire continued to expand under the Praetorians' watch. The legions conquered parts of Britain, founding Londinium, modern-day London. The provinces enjoyed a more transparent taxation system, and non-Roman nobility began to enter the Senate in significant numbers. One notable figure during this time was Vespasian Flavius, a grandchild of an Italian peasant, who would go on to establish the Flavian dynasty. Vespasian and his son Titus, known for quelling the Jewish rebellion, are often viewed through the lens of modern standards as having committed genocide. Their siege led to the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem, leaving only the Western Wall standing. On a more peculiar note, Vespasian humorously imposed a tax on urine collected at public toilets, a commodity used in various industrial processes. Titus, despite his role in Jerusalem's destruction, earned the title of the Merciful after inaugurating the Colosseum with grand festivities, earning him the affectionate moniker, the love and consolation of mankind. However, these extravagant events strained the public treasury. Following this period of celebration, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius destroyed Pompeii, and a devastating plague hit half of Italy. Despite these calamities, Titus was deified posthumously. The 2nd century is celebrated as the era of the 5 good emperors, with Trajan often hailed as the finest among them. Under his rule, Rome's population soared to 1 million, and the empire expanded to its greatest territorial extent. This period saw the construction of an extensive network of paved roads, which not only connected the empire, but also laid the foundation for Europe's modern transport map. After Trajan's conquests, his successor Hadrian shifted focus to fortification and defence. He erected massive structures, including the renowned Hadrian's Wall in Britain, and fortifications along the Rhine and Danube rivers. In Rome, he commissioned the Pantheon, a marvel of ancient architecture with its massive dome, a sensation of its time, dedicated to all the gods. Hadrian also commemorated his lover, Antinous, in art, making his image one of the most preserved from the Roman era. The last of the 5 good emperors, Marcus Aurelius, known as the Philosopher King, spent much of his reign on military expeditions. In quieter moments, he penned Meditations, a seminal work of Stoic philosophy. The end of the Pax Romana is often attributed to Marcus Aurelius's son, Commodus. His preference for the life of a gladiator over state affairs led to neglect and decline. Commodus's assassination, orchestrated by conspirators and executed by the slave Narcissus, marked the beginning of a tumultuous period. The ensuing century saw a carousel of emperors, often installed by the army's will. This era featured a diverse range of rulers, including a former slave, a fortune seeker who purchased the throne at an auction, and a general of Punic descent who even placed statues of Hannibal, the famed enemy of Rome, throughout the empire. During this period of instability, the Roman Empire saw a diverse range of rulers, including a Syrian priest of the sun god and a former shepherd, whose formidable physique contributed to his popularity. In a landmark decision in 212 AD, Emperor Caracalla, of mixed North African and Syrian heritage, extended Roman citizenship to nearly all free inhabitants of the empire. This revolutionary idea, that one could be a Roman regardless of geographical location, remains one of Rome's most enduring legacies. By mid-century, however, the empire was engulfed in such severe crisis that entire provinces began to secede. The Gauls, for instance, declared their own independent empire. Order was eventually restored by Diocletian, the son of a liberated slave. Starting his career as a soldier, Diocletian rose to become an absolute monarch, exemplifying extraordinary social mobility. To manage the sprawling empire more effectively, Diocletian implemented a radical administrative reform. He divided the empire into 4 segments, each governed by a co-ruler and based in a capital closer to the empire's frontiers. This decentralization diminished Rome's status. The Senate was reduced to a mere town council. The empire was now overseen by a vast bureaucracy, with officials directly accountable to the emperor. With these transformations, the ancient world, once centered around the concept of a free community and citizens, witnessed a fundamental shift. The emperor, initially seen as princeps, or the first among senators, evolved into dominus, a term slaves used for their masters. This change symbolized a profound alteration in societal structure. Citizens became subjects, warriors transformed into professional soldiers, and farmers were reduced to a semi-serf status. Diocletian, after 2 decades as emperor, abdicated and retired to his estate to cultivate cabbages, an unprecedented act in Roman history. Following Diocletian's departure, the co-rulers engaged in power struggles, with Constantine, later known as St. Constantine the Great, emerging victorious. Before his pivotal battle for Rome, he reportedly had a vision of a cross, which led to his conversion to Christianity. Under his rule, all religions were granted equal status, ending 3 centuries of Christian persecutions. Christians, once confined to the catacombs, were now permitted to build churches, standing proudly beside the temples of ancient Roman deities. Constantine also relocated the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Byzantium, renaming it Constantinople. Later, Theodosius I would take a more drastic step by making Christianity the official state religion and initiating the destruction of ancient temples. Theodosius I, known as the last emperor of a united Roman Empire, saw his sons divide the empire into western and eastern halves upon his death. The eastern part, known to us as Byzantium, continued for another 1,000 years. In contrast, the Western Empire succumbed to the Great Migration, ironically falling to a new wave of migrants, much like its foundation by Romulus and Remus. Adding to this irony, the last ruler of the Western Roman Empire was also named Romulus,